No, we don't live together.
Did you commute together today?
No.
It's back on.
He was here before I was.
Mike, we're on.
Okay. Okay, we reconvene.
Danielle, let us know.
Anybody in the gallery, if you see the lights have gone out, wave or get our attention, especially my attention. For the record, at some point the transmission dropped. We don't know why. The board has been receiving the administrator's report. There was a question about numbers of judges. That was discussed briefly, and I think that's a sufficient summary at this point. So
the contractor team that provides database support and software development for MD voters is in place. So they are busy supporting and developing future releases of MD voters. Earlier this week, the Maryland MD voters team met to prioritize identified issues and discuss transitioning to a new methodology, which is called Agile. And that's a methodology that DoIT is requiring that projects be used. There are numbers here for two different types of things: MVA transactions, so the January data for voter attrition, and then non-citizen referrals. 3 have been submitted to the Office of the State Prosecutor. The rest are pending in light of some other activities that are going on here. So
I just want to interrupt a moment. On the state prosecutor, the non-citizen section of the state prosecutor issues, I know, we all know that we have a new state prosecutor. The question would be, how much interaction we've had with the state prosecutor at this point. I don't think we're at the top of their list of concerns, but it would be good to have someone, where we could ask questions about what happens when we refer things up to the state prosecutor's office. And so I'm really just raising that as a concern and not to be addressed in this meeting.
Mike, comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Monday, I had my confirmation hearing in front of the Senate, and it just so happened that the state prosecutor had to be confirmed as well. The new one was sitting next to me, and he's the one that is tasked. I'm trying to remember his name. It's the first time I remember.
Chuck Howard.
Chuck Howard, yeah, really nice guy, and said it was a priority actually for him in his office, and that's what he was tasked with. Gave me his business card, said we could reach out to him. I told him about our concern about especially those who had voted, who were somebody who has an illegal status who had voted, and that we'd like to get updates on that. I also expressed to him directly that we would like to have feedback if there was something that we were doing, if he would like information that would further help him in prosecution in something that we weren't providing. We would be very open to understand that, so we could provide better information. And so I said I had his business card, and I plan on reaching out myself as well. And I don't know if you have any further comment to that.
Just the communications I've had with him, he confirmed to me every single referral that gets made to his office gets investigated. There have been, since 2016, I think it was 2 prosecutions for voters who voted illegal as a result of their not being a citizen. Every case gets investigated. Either in some cases the person turns out to have been a citizen. In other cases there's a sort of a failure of proof. But they do pursue these and prosecute the ones they feel like they can win.
Right.
And just to follow up, so when he got appointed, he came down and met with a group of us and heard similar to what you were saying. They're interested in extending the statute of limitations on election bills, on election crimes, and so there's a bill pending that would do just that. We did some research for them as to what other states, what their statute of limitation is on election crimes. So the people that are actually working the cases and doing the investigation haven't changed. So there's continuity there with the people that Jared and Mary work with. So that's a continuing relationship that we have with them.
I got to just say that I was very happy with my conversation with him, and that felt like that it was a priority for the office and what they wanted, and that he was very open to good lines of communication. And like I said, I had expressed to him if there was something that additional he needed that we weren't providing that would assist, and we would like to do that. We'd like to make sure we're able to, those that aren't supposed to vote, if they actually vote, should be prosecuted. And what can we do to assist with that? So I was very happy to sit next to him. So.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So it looks like we'll be getting a new party, perhaps, added. The Working Class Party submitted petition signatures to meet the requirement of 10,000 signatures, which is the threshold to get recognized as a party in Maryland. They were short 133 signatures and are expected to submit the balance of signatures on Monday. And then once we get those petitions, they will get processed here because it won't probably be very many, and we can do that instead of sending them out to the counties. So in Jared's absence, sorry, the 920 candidates filed for office for this cycle. We'd like to send a big thank you to 3 counties, Charles, Frederick, and Wicomico. Those local boards served as satellite filing offices for the delegates to the national conventions. This made it more convenient for the delegates to not have to come to Annapolis, and it helped alleviate some of the pressure here, as well as just the logistics of coming to Annapolis and parking in the traffic. So thank you to those 3 counties. Listed next are 6 enforcement actions that included some civil penalties, so those are there for your review. In Keith's absence, I will do the project management office. So inventory is just an ongoing thing here. We're getting ready for the next inventory audit, which is going to start in our next month. And this is making sure that the local boards and us are properly putting all of the equipment in the inventory system and tracking it, and then reconciling what we purchased versus what is in the inventory system. It's a thankless job. Some final deliveries have been made. The counties, the local boards ordered some additional carts and booths, and those have been delivered. We are still trying to get connectivity at our warehouse in Glen Burnie. Looks like we're targeted mid to late March, and I'd like to thank Bill for helping get some help from Do It on this project. And then lastly, we neglected to put it in here. I'll say this now. We are planning to replace the electronic poll books for the 2022 election. There's some mention of that in our budget analysis because it's going through that major IT project approval process this session, and we've selected a project manager for that project. Her name is Caitlin Waitley. She was part of our new voting system implementation team, and so is familiar with how we work here in the local boards, and it's in the beginning stages of that process. We were recently notified about some roof leaking issues in Somerset County. This is the warehouse facility for the Somerset County Board of Elections, and we're working with various people in the county and the local boards to address this. On Tuesday, an industrial hygienist went to the facility to perform an assessment and to swab the surfaces of the equipment. We hope to get the report hopefully tomorrow, if not the beginning part of next week. And then based on what that report says, take the appropriate action.
I assume we're swabbing for mold.
Yes. So I'm going to turn it over to Shafiq now.
So good afternoon. For voting system update, preparation for the April election, SB conducted a statewide test of EXP, which is an export utility used to transmit unofficial results, files from the 24 local boards back at the headquarters on election night. We did that test until in January. The test was successful and involved all local boards of elections. We continue to work with the SNS to offer training to the local boards. This training covers the electionware platform for tabulation of results, burning media for testing, all the different variables associated with the election management system. To date, we have 67 trainings requested, 40 which have been delivered.
Just want to make a comment that, how many weeks ago it's been now, we did SBE did a briefing on the security of the poll book network to the big 6 counties. And Shafiq was the person that spearheaded this particular presentation. I attended the presentation, and I just wanted to note to everyone that I felt that Shafiq did a superb job. He was articulate, completely clear, answered every question, had a grasp of the material, so that he was able to field whatever came his way, and it was an impressive performance, and I wanted to specifically say it in this meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's all I have.
Quick question. There's 67 training requests, so there's 24 jurisdictions. So that means they're requesting training on multiple areas?
And there's multiple areas, and then even though there's 24 local boards, they may have new employees, so there can be a variation of the number of attendees. But the training can be software, it can be hardware. There's a lot of different variables. So it's about 6 or 7 different training sessions that are offered.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that complete the administrator's report?
No, Donna.
Legislation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. In the administrator's report, there are, I think, 20-some bills listed. But in your packets are the reports that we track, broken into 3 categories: election general, campaign finance, and then ballot question type things. So we get those. Those were as of 2 a.m. this morning. I can send them periodically if you'd like. In the meantime, the list that we pulled out, I'm going to just highlight a couple. As far as the ballot questions are concerned, it seems that Senate Bill number 1, Senate Bill 4, one of them that talks about sports betting will potentially appear on the 2020 ballot, and the other one would be the separation of governor and lieutenant governor. The number 3 is the prepaid postage for the return of absentee ballots. The number 7 is references to absentee voting, to be called mail-in voting. We'll see where that takes us. 362, potentially the timing of the absentee canvass, moving that from Thursday to Friday. And there's several with the correctional facilities and distribution of voter registration information. And 16, House Bill 392, is notification to the state administrator if any election equipment has parts made not in the U.S., I take it. Number 17 is public transportation to early voting sites. And I suppose if there's specific questions about any of them, we'll try to answer what we can. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So
The full list is not in your folder.
Oh.
Would you all prefer to receive it electronically? Because it updates every night, so you don't
Okay.
just delete it if you don't want to.
Sure.
Yeah.
So can you
I'll
do
have
that,
it.
Don?
Yeah, sure,
Electronically.
sure.
Because it's probably already out of date. You know.
It is, I'm sure, yeah.
All right. Is that completely enough?
Absolutely.
Okay. The next agenda item is the 7th Congressional District Special Primary Election Review. Unless there's an objection, we have intended to actually move this in the agenda item to Mr. Hogan. But it strikes me that we have a combination of a variety of things, and it might be more efficient to take care of some of the other items we have before us, the Assistant Attorney General's report, the approvals of the late fee waivers and waiver requests and so on, which I don't believe are going to engage us for very long. And then we have a speaker, and the speaker is going to speak about concerns following the February election, which would be that primary. So what I'm considering is do the other administrative things, have our speaker address whatever issues she's got, so we'll already have that in our minds, and then we'll go into the special primary election and address that. We already know that we have at least three closed session matters, personnel issues, litigation, and security. So if there's no objection, then I'll move the agenda that way. Assistant Attorney General's report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several matters to update this month. The Fusaro matter is one of our voter list cases. That's the First Amendment case. That case now has been fully briefed for summary judgment, and we're awaiting ruling from the court. The second two matters on this first page, there's no update from the last month, so I'll skip those. The fourth matter also has no update to provide. We're in the same position we were in towards the end of last month, but we're continuing to negotiate a proper resolution of that case in light of the Fourth Circuit's ruling in December. That's the Online Electioneering and Transparency Act case challenge brought by the various newspaper websites. The next matter is the challenge brought by the Libertarian Party to the rules in Maryland for obtaining and retaining recognition as a party. We had argument in the Fourth Circuit. We prevailed on the motion to dismiss last year. Argument in the Fourth Circuit took place January 29th, and now we're just waiting for a decision there. Number 6, the Fucon matter. Ms. Fucon was the Republican nominee for the controller in the controller's election for controller in 2018. She asserted that Mr. Francho, who had won the election, had irregularities in his campaign finance reporting that precluded him from taking office. The case was dismissed that she had brought by the Circuit Court for Anne Arundel County, and she sought an appeal in bank to a three-judge panel of the Circuit Court for Anne Arundel County. The decision came down on January 31st, affirming the dismissal of the Circuit Court's original order of dismissal. I know she's been in touch with Jared about having some of her concerns investigated in the normal course rather than through litigation, and so we'll see what comes of that. Next matter is the National Federation of the Blind versus Lamone. This is a case challenging the BNB policy that this board has adopted and that has been, other versions of which have been in place since 2016. The plaintiffs in that case are seeking relief in the form of a court order that would require everyone in Maryland to at least be defaulted to using the ballot marking device and only opt out in order to use a paper ballot. The plaintiffs in that case moved for a preliminary injunction requiring that would require that relief to be imposed in time for the November 2020 election. On February 10th, the argument in that was heard last month on the 17th of January, and on February 10th, the court issued an order denying that motion for preliminary injunction. The court also denied our motion to dismiss at the same time, so that case is going to proceed into discovery. We have a pretty aggressive discovery schedule that's going to result in us, at least according to the current schedule, discovery wrapping up in the summer and the parties filing dispositive motions by, I think, the end of July. So that's where that currently stands. The next matter is the case brought by an individual seeking to obtain access to the ballot in all of the states as a candidate for the nomination for the Democratic nomination for president. The defendants, he filed suit in federal court in New York. The defendants are 40 some odd states or state secretaries of state, collectively moved to dismiss. He filed an amended complaint in January, and we renewed our motion to dismiss along with the other 40 or so state defendants, and that's currently pending before the court. The next matter is Chong Soo-Yi versus Hogan. He brought 2 cases in Montgomery County Circuit Court, variously challenging the use of places of worship as polling places, challenging the use of, best as I could tell, ballot scanners to tabulate ballots, and challenging the identification of candidates by their political parties on the general election ballots. Those cases were dismissed by the Circuit Court in Montgomery County last month, and he has appealed one of those dismissals. I don't believe he has yet to appeal the other, but his time for doing so is running short if it hasn't expired already. Last is the Public Interest Legal Foundation versus Lamone. That is another voter list case. We have sought, because that case is so similar to the Judicial Watch case, we have sought a stay in the Public Interest Legal Foundation case pending the court's final resolution of the Judicial Watch case, and to the extent any appeal is taken from that case, the resolution of any appeal, arguing that it would just be busy work, or not busy work, but it would just be work that would become mooted one way or the other by the ultimate ruling in that case. So that motion is currently pending before the court.
Thank you. Next item is approval of late fee waivers. Who's covering that one?
Good afternoon. Enclosed are the waiver results, which were submitted by the campaign committees that have been assessed late filing fees. The attached waiver request information page contains an overview of each committee as well as the administrative recommendations for the board's approval on granting a waiver request.
Does anyone on the board have any questions regarding the waiver of late filing fees? Okay. All right. There is one thing I've already actually talked to Jared about. I just wanted to make a note of it, that one individual seemed to me to have a fairly robust reason for the failures to file. But nevertheless, as Jared pointed out, they do still need to file.
Right.
And so we're really waiting for that filing beyond everything else. So with that, I believe we are approving the late fee waivers. Chair will entertain a motion to do that.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes. Late fee waivers are approved. Approval of Title 14 waiver requests. Now, the Title 14 waiver requests, as I understand it, these are the organizations, the PACs.
That's right.
And this was also, as was the other one, distributed prior to the board meeting. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of these? Hearing none, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the waiver requests.
I don't think there are. That's just
Were they all together?
information.
So we're just information then? Okay. Indeed. Okay. So noted. Adoption of final regulations, subtitles 1 and 19, same day registration and address change. Who's got that one, Tracy?
That is me. In your packet, you have memorandum from Nikki and I dated February 5th regarding regulations that we approved at the September meeting regarding overall same-day registration. It's 33.0101, 33.1902, and 33.1904. You also have the memo that was originally sent in September explaining the amendments, and then a copy of the changes as submitted. The proposed regulations were published in the December 20th edition of the Maryland Register. Public comment period closed on January 21st, and there were no comments. So I'm requesting that you approve them unless you have any questions.
Anyone questions or comments?
Just a process question.
Yeah.
So you said there were no comments. I mean, they went through the whole process.
Correct.
And yet we have an email here from someone with comments. Did they not go through the proper channels and
Correct.
file it?
We just got
That's
that.
why we post them on the Maryland Register.
That's correct. Yeah, we just received that.
Thank you.
Will that person be notified that it was not received timely, or? That the window closed?
When somebody makes a public comment to something that we post, is it done by email to this office, or is it done through a public system?
Typically, it's via email, even though they can send paper copies. When something's published in the register, any set of amendments has a contact person. So, like for these, I was the contact person. If it's something about campaign finance, it would go to Jared. It just sort of depends. But in this particular case, I didn't receive any emails or letters.
This one came yesterday, I think.
Correct. Yeah. This morning or yesterday.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the reason I raised the issue is historically, the process, when regulations get posted to the Maryland Register, there's a 30 or 45-day window where they can make 30-day window for public comment, and there is historically, or there can be some back and forth between the agency, whatever agency it is, and the person making the comments. I'm just venting. I mean, it's a little unfair and I don't even see her here. Maybe that's why she emails me to drop comments on a regulation that was posted that had a 30-day window for public comment, and we now have in front of us a motion. There will be a motion to adopt the final regs, and then this shows up. So, since this is live streamed and recorded, that's my.
Can I submit that maybe these are unrelated? That when I'm looking at what we're changing, and although it's dealing with the same area of law, this is nothing to do with what we're changing.
I agree completely.
Okay.
Yes. I did read this email.
Yeah.
And
So it doesn't
person's
look like
trying to inject something into other regulations.
right. That's not in what we're dealing with what was proposed. So, if I may, I move that we accept the final regulations of Subtitle 1 and 19 as presented.
I just had one process question myself. I noticed that the memo for proposing the regulations was September 13th. So we must have voted on that at the September meeting.
Correct.
But how long does it take before you get them into the Maryland Register? Because they weren't published until December 20th, about 3 months later. Is that typical?
There's a schedule, and what has frequently happened is we'll have a board meeting, and then it seems to be that the deadline to post something to the ALR committee has
has just passed. So there's usually like 2 weeks that I have to wait before they accept new ones. But there's a 15-day review period by the AELR committee. And then there's a time period when you submit it to the Division of State Documents before they publish. So it can be.
So 30 days, or excuse me, 90 days is not unusual.
Regulations can be a very long process.
Yeah. So that was my question.
Motion to approve has been made. Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Thank you.
Next item. Approval of polling place changes, Prince George's County.
You have a letter dated, or an email dated to Linda dated February 20th from Alicia Alexander of the Prince George's County Election Office, the election director, asking that we approve the emergency change of the 7-11 polling place from the Evangel Cathedral to the Largo Community Center. And the Largo Community Center is large enough to accommodate the 4,000 registered voters and is fully accessible. And they will provide all the proper notice to the voters. And I'd like your approval. The Prince George's County Board has already approved it.
Questions or comments?
That's the Largo Community Church, right? Not
I'm
community
sorry,
center.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Any others?
Well, I just have a comment, not about this, but when we get requests like this, perhaps it would be good for us to have a map attached so that we could see the difference and see if there's any. I happen to be aware of both these locations. It doesn't bother me, but I'm sure I'll get others.
Sure.
And I would like to be able to,
Okay.
eyeball it to a certain extent. Thank you.
No further questions or comments? Chair will entertain a motion to approve the emergency polling place change in Prince George's County.
So moved.
Second.
Move second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The emergency polling place change is approved.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any old business that we've not dealt with? None. Is there any new business? And we're coming back to the 7th congressional, actually in relatively few moments with everything that entails. Any other than that, any new business? Hearing none. At that point, Ms. De Gracias, if you would care to come forward, and you're welcome to stand or sit to make a presentation, and we'll hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board, for having me today. My name is Sherry DeOgracias, and I'm a law clerk with the ACLU of Maryland. First, I wanted to start off with thanking the Board and thanking specifically Nikki Charleston for always being very, very great about being a key partner in solving a day of problems. The State Board of Elections has been extremely responsive, and we're really happy with the relationship that we have, and hope to continue this partnership in these coming elections this year. So this past year, I was in charge of our hotline, in which voters will call in if they have a question, a concern, or something of the matter. And so we hope to provide very, very the most accurate information possible. And so they come to us with certain problems, and we just wanted to, again, partner with you to help figure out some of these problems that we saw on the day of. So some of the biggest, the 3 buckets that we saw were voter privacy. So some of the election judges made some of the voters feel a little bit intimidated, because what they did after the voters voted, the election judge had looked at their ballot, and understanding that that's not supposed to happen, Just wanted to suggest, some further education, maybe a message to local boards or, some kind of solution to make sure that election judges aren't doing that on the day of. And in terms of same-day registration, understanding that this is a new process, we had two different issues come up. So the first one being election judges being confused about which type of ballot the person that is registering on the same day should receive, whether that's a provisional ballot or a regular ballot. Understanding if they provide certain kinds of documentation, they're supposed to receive regular ballots, but in practice, that wasn't happening. They were receiving provisional ballots where they should have been receiving regular ballots. And so we were also hoping that there was a process in place to help election judges really quickly understand what kind of ballot that person should be receiving, because I understand that it could be a complicated thing to remember, and it's they're not necessarily doing this day in, day out. So just trying to figure out a way to make that a little bit easier for people to figure that out and make sure that the process is implemented in the most precise way possible. In terms of the other thing about same-day registration that I would like the board to kind of walk us through is one of the biggest reasons why I'm here is we don't necessarily know what that's going to look like in terms of the numbers and how that's going to impact provisional ballots. So we were just wondering how the State Board of Elections and local boards of elections figure out, like, numerically how many provisional ballots should be allocated to each precinct, because with the same day registration, there might be an influx of folks who are voting provisionally. And so I understand in the past there have been a few hiccups in terms of having enough provisional ballots on site, which causes long lines and delays. So helping to understand that, and then there were a few technical issues that caused some longer lines, and I understand that there were poll books that were transmitting data back to a centralized place, and we were just hoping to know if there was any plan in place to address that, just because we were hoping that, understanding that the special election was going to be a smaller election, when we go into the general primary and when we go into the actual general election, there's going to be many more people voting. And so hoping to understand what plan is going to be put in place so that we're not causing undue long lines because of technical issues, such as the information being transmitted back centralized. But I'm sorry. I want to thank you so much for having me, and was hoping, I don't know what the process is, but do I open it up for discussion, or how does this?
Well, if any of the board members have questions or comments, they're welcome to ask them or make them at this point. But I think probably Ms. Charlson is going to either delegate or provide you with a contact where you could have more information flow back and forth, at the administration level. So I'm guessing that.
Correct.
Does any board member have any question or comment about this?
So I just had a quick question. First, you talked about voter privacy. So you're saying the scanner judge, so when they went to to have their ballot scanned, that's when they felt uncomfortable. And the voters, how many voters called in with that? Do you know?
There are numerous voters that came in, and yes, to my understanding, it was when after they had voted, they handed over their ballot, and that person took a good long look at it.
And do you know, were they issued a privacy sleeve that their ballot could be in before they put it in? Do you know, by chance?
I'm not quite sure on that, but I do think that it's important to note that in terms of, like, even if they had the sleeve, that person was still able to see the people that they were voting for. So that's what makes it feel.
It made it seem like you just said, in the testimony that it seemed like maybe they didn't have a sleeve and that handed it over, and then the person could have seen it, because you have the ability with the sleeve to walk up and feed it in yourself, right from the sleeve.
Right. I think they were being assisted.
Okay.
So when they were being assisted in terms of turning in their ballot, the person who was helping them had taken a look at the ballot and then put it in.
Okay.
Well,
That was my only question.
I mean, not to belabor the point, but every time I voted, I have it in the sleeve. I take it over, I put it in. You have to have somebody there, because some people just can't figure it out.
Right.
So I can imagine a situation where a person's like, I don't know what to do, and they hand it to the person, the judge or whatever, you call that person, and they put it in the scanner. I mean, it's like, you can't do this. I mean, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just not. I'll put it on you. We all need to better educate voters that it is their right to have a private ballot, and that they should protect their ballot. But if they're not able to work the scanner, somebody's got to help them. I mean, that would be a problem if we said, okay, nobody can be near the scanners. No election official can be near the scanner. There you got backups, people that can't feed it.
Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting point, but I do think that for someone to actually go out of their way to call a hotline and tell them that they are extremely uncomfortable about this, this practice, I think that that's like a whole nother level.
Did they ask, wait, you can't see my ballot? Or did they ask the chief judge, bring it to the chief judge's attention?
See, I think that it's interesting, because what we try to do is we try to help people better understand, what the process should look like and make them feel comfortable throughout that whole process. But I think that the normal lay voter may not know to assert that kind of thing. But I also think that it would be, it could be an easy solution to just remind everyone, like, this is, a very personal but also very private practice. And even if you're assisting to, make the effort of, like, if you get handed this, to put it in the privacy folder and then, put it in the scanner, I think it's a pretty easy fix and just a simple reminder to election judges that, that should be the practice.
Isn't that in the judge's training manuals?
Yeah, as a comment, this is something the board's addressed actually numerous times, but kind of election to election. There's a privacy, what do we call it? It's not a barrier, but it's like a screen. Okay, that's new. We do train them that they're supposed to stay back unless there's a problem and they have to step forward. It is just general training, and has been, that they're not supposed to, unnecessarily handle the ballot or whatever. So we take it seriously, and we have the privacy training, the stand back training, and we put the physical screen in to help ensure privacy. So we do take it seriously. What I would suggest is when people give you these comments, try to extract more information from them and then feed that back to SBE, so to the staff, so that we have a better sense. And obviously we'd like to know what precinct it is too, when this comes up. But as Mr. Hogan said, if the voter was having trouble, and sometimes judges are too forward-leaning about this, and it doesn't take much for them to, especially if there's a line, get over there and help get this thing in. And a judge may well have looked down to see that the paper was oriented correctly to go into the scanner, and that could account for it. But we take it seriously. That's why we have the other things in place. So that's the one thing we can definitively answer to you today.
Thank you.
And beyond that, staff will take care of conducting that discourse with you.
And we
Mr.
have all
Flynn,
of
did you
that
have anything?
information, so I'm going to address
I thought you,
I think you covered everything that I was going to address on the privacy, but you also raised a question on the same-day registration. Judges being confused which ballots to give to them, whether the regular ballot or provisional ballot. Was this a normal occurrence? I mean, did you get many complaints on this? Because, this was the first time this was done, so there would be a little bit of confusion.
Right.
Hopefully, it will be corrected as they continue to do this process. First day, first time, you got a lot of bugs. So
Absolutely.
just bear with us. I'm sure that the training and everything, I can't see how they would be confused about which ballot to give them if it's same-day registration, because it's clear which one they should receive. But I'm sure that will be looked into too.
If I can, and I think that's a good point Malcolm makes there. Having 8 years worked in the county where I fielded exactly what you're talking about live, so how do I solve this problem? And I always told people, I still want to hear about it after the election, but boy, would I like to have heard about it on election day.
Right.
Right? And so I would say you would want to have relationships not only with the state board, but with some of the local boards, so that if something was happening at a particular precinct at a particular day, in Anne Arundel County, we went from 29 employees to 2,700, right, on election day. You're going to have some people that, although you've trained them twice, they just don't remember. It's not possible to have 2,700 people all do it perfect from 2 trainings, right? So, but then if you had a relationship where they could fix it that day, then if somebody didn't understand that there was a database that's going to tell them which, if they're not in the database, they're going to get a provisional, and if they have the ID, I would say that would be something you could fix real time.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are all things that we did day of. Those issues that we fixed day of weren't presented today. These were more so of the kinds of things that we were hoping to have a plan in place or proactively think about as we're coming into a larger population of an election. And I think it's just, again, 3 very important things that we could be doing beforehand and planning for previous, so that they don't happen later on. But yes, I completely understand, and that's definitely something I was doing that day. It was making a lot of phone calls.
anything further? Ma'am, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
And with that, at this point, we will move further into 7th Congressional District Special Primary Election Review. Nikki, you want to
So
take us
you
through that?
have in your packet something that looks like the administrative report, but is labeled 7th Congressional District Special Primary Election Review. So before each election, we have calls with both counsel to local boards of elections and the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, and we did those for this election as well. We had a call with the counsel for the 3 local boards involved in this election, and Andrea, and we just talked about what was new for this election, explained the state board's policy on the use of the ballot marking devices, and gave them an update on litigation just so they were ready for February. We will have another set of calls before April, but wanted to bring those 3 counsel up to date and give them the opportunity to ask questions. The following week, we had a call coordinated by MEMA, the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, and that the audience of that call are local boards of elections and local emergency management officials. And we get a briefing from the National Weather Service and a threat assessment from the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, which is our state's fusion center, if you know what a fusion center is. This is a center, a state-federal partnership for doing threat assessment, cyber and non-cyber, and they gave us an assessment. And then we provide the people on the call with critical election functions, when they occur, where they occur, so that the state and local emergency management officials know where there might be support needed. The Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center reported that there were no threats related to this election. And again, we will have similar calls with that same audience. Actually, we're expanding it a little bit more for the April election. We're including the Maryland Center for School Safety in the call because so many of our polling places are schools. So the notice of the election and same-day registration, there were two types of mailers that we sent out before the election. In lieu of a sample ballot, we sent out on behalf of the local boards a notice of the election to each registered voter that included the same information that's in the sample ballot. It just was consolidated, the date, the time, where that person votes, and a copy of the ballot. Under the law that created same-day registration, there was a requirement that we notify individuals who appear eligible to vote but aren't registered. We mailed that postcard out before this election. So absentee ballot delivery, our mail house vendor sent out about, or a little over 1,000 absentee ballots over just over a month. We sent emails to 727 voters who had requested that their absentee ballot be available via our website. 545 of those voters logged in, and there's a table showing you how those voters who got their ballots via our website, whether they chose to download the blank ballot and mark it by hand, or whether the voter chose to use the ballot marking tool. In either way, in either case, the voter had to print out the ballot and mail it back. And the difference, UOCAVA is an acronym that stands for the federal law. It's Uniformed and Overseas Civilians Absentee Voting Act, and that's our military and overseas voters. That's what the UOCAVA voters mean. Wanted to give you some data on ballot marking devices, and would like to thank Andrea for summarizing it for me so easily. In Baltimore City, 178 out of the 184 polling places complied with the board's 5-voter minimum. I think the sense is that the 6 precincts that didn't meet it had pretty low turnout. There was one precinct that only had 6 voters show up, but 97% compliance rate. And in Howard and Baltimore County, all of their precincts met that 5 minimum of 5 voter policy. And we also included what percentage of election day voters used the ballot marking device. And in all 3 counties were about the same, almost a little, either about 12% of voters used the ballot marking device to mark their ballots, which is an increase from prior elections.
Just a quick comment that if you, for me at least, if you pass on to Baltimore County and Howard County that well done. And Baltimore City, I think they rate probably a good job as well. You get 6 voters in a precinct, it's tough. And, you know, we'd like to see more, and you know, another precinct, nobody used it. So there was no segregation in that instance. But, and there was only, well, that was the 6-voter precinct. So, I think, and I'm speaking for the board without having spoken with the board, but I think we're all pretty happy at seeing that response on a special election, a no-notice, start from scratch, get this done immediately election. So, you know, open it up for any comments or thoughts about the AMDs from any other board members. Go.
Included next are some voter turnout numbers, so about 87,000 voters across all 3 counties participated. That's about a 21% turnout. It was highest in Howard County, followed by Baltimore County and the city. 73% of the absentee ballots delivered were returned for counting, and a counting rate of almost 98%. 2/3 of the rejected absentee ballots were rejected because they were untimely. Most voters voted on election day, with 2,200 voters voting an absentee ballot. The provisional count was about 4,700. About 25% of those provisional ballots were rejected because the individual wasn't eligible to vote in this election. That's pretty normal for a primary election when we have voters who aren't affiliated with either party wanting to come and participate. And then adding to that, were voters who don't live in Congressional District 7 that wanted to vote in Congressional District 7. So it's higher than normal because we had that secondary factor, but we usually have the highest rejection rate for provisional in the primary is unaffiliated or other parties trying to participate. So I'll turn over post-election audits to Tracy.
There's two specific post-election audits we talk about. The first is comprehensive audit. After each election, we perform a comprehensive audit of various aspects of the election. The voting system, division reviews data associated with pre-election, logic and accuracy testing, that's the LNA testing that Steve talked about, opening times of the election day polling places. We review the discrepancies between the number of voters checked in to vote and the number of ballots actually cast, and performing the voting system verification. The Election Reform and Management Division, that would be Aaron and Courtney, collect various documents from local boards to complete other auditing tasks, including polling place evaluation forms, ballot accounting forms. An audit is also performed on absentee and provisional ballots from each local board and the canvassing minutes. Finally, I collect canvassing minutes from each local board for the absentee and provisional canvasses and compare the results reported in the minutes against the results in the voting system and voter history information in MD papers. We have started this audit, and we will provide the local boards with any findings from the selection in time for them to take corrective action for the combined special general and the presidential primary election in April. Secondly, we have the automated ballot tabulation audit. Clear Ballot Group conducted the post-election automated tabulation audit for this election. Audit reports comparing the voting system results from Election Day against the audit results, Phase 1 reports, were distributed to the three local boards before the local board certified the election. Reports comparing all voting system results, which is Election Day and the absentee and provisional canvases, against the audit results, which we call the Phase 2 reports, were distributed before the district-wide results were certified. For each phase, we received 4 reports. The first is total cards cast for each counter group, and counter group is Election Day, and then each canvas is called a counter group. Total cards cast by precinct, and total votes for each candidate in each contest. And then finally, there's a threshold report showing any discrepancies in those first 3 reports. And I can report that there was no variances greater than 0.5% between the voting system results and the audit results. In Howard County, 2 sets of results were identical. The 2 sets of results were identical. Baltimore City and Baltimore County, there were very small differences between 2 sets of results, 0.005% and 0.04% respectively. This audit therefore validated the voting system accurately, counted the votes cast in the election, and these audit reports are posted on our website under ballot audit plan.
Any questions or comments? I have one.
Yeah.
When you have a discrepancy, I realize it's 0.04%. What actually happens that there would be that kind of an error? I mean, it says we've done one thing, we should have this number, and we got this number back, and the numbers don't match.
Sure. There's a number of things that can cause discrepancies. A lot of times it can be there's a write-in. The audit reads the ovals. So a lot of times the errors are the discrepancies is somebody has a write-in, but then they don't fill in the oval. Other times it can be that there's a stray mark, and the voting system reads that one way, and the audit reads another way. Sometimes there can be a voter who marked one oval, crossed it off, and then marked another oval. The audit would count that as no vote. So those are some of the most common.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next section is about electronic poll books. So as you know, for this election, we used a network to connect the poll books to a server here, and overall the network performed as expected. We received over 72,000 transactions on election day. We were able to monitor public activity at over 300 precincts and loaded voter history into MD voters in time for the 3 local boards to prepare for the absentee and provisional canvases. For the first time, we had insight into when polling places open, when poll books weren't operating as expected. I will share a story that Guy shared with us, that he was watching the dashboard and saw that a poll book in a precinct was not turned on and working properly. And he immediately called his technician in the field, said, go to this precinct, figure it out. And when the technician walked in, the election judge said, I didn't even call you, because they were able to see it in real time and dispatch somebody to get it back working in circulation to manage the voting process. So we've never been able to do that on election day, and we were able to do that and help us better serve voters and improve our experience. While the vast majority of voters voted without issue over 13 hours, there were some voters who experienced delays. About 5:30, we started receiving reports that the poll books were slowing down. We initially checked to make sure that we could see the traffic crossing the network, and we did. We turned off the network for all of the poll books in one county, and that county reported an immediate improvement in the performance of the poll books. And so then we proceeded to disconnect all of the poll books from that network at about 6:20, and those poll books' performance improved, and we left the network shut off for the rest of the 90 minutes left in the day, the 100 minutes left in the day. As with any process, we are committed to looking at evaluating how the election worked and working to fix it, and so we are doing that. Obviously, we want voters to have confidence that their experience will be safe and timely and efficient for them and secure. And so we decided that the local boards will not be required to connect their poll books to our servers on election day in April or November. If a local board chooses to connect to the server, we will work with them to make sure that the voters' experience is efficient and smooth and secure. And local boards can also decide to connect all of the precincts or a subset of precincts if they want to do it on the smaller scale. We will support either. The routers will be used during early voting and on election day to ensure that voters don't vote more than once. So during early voting, the poll books are connected to the network to prevent someone from going from early voting center 1 voting and going to early voting center number 2 and voting. And we've had that network set up since 2010 to prevent that from happening. On election day, the routers will be used to create a wired connection of the poll books within the polling place. We have been connecting poll books with wires since we've implemented the poll books in 2006. And what that does is that prevents someone from going to the same polling place twice, getting checked in on, let's call it check-in station number 1, and then coming back and getting checked in on voting station 4. Those poll books need to be connected to prevent someone from doing that. And that's a wired connection. It always has been, and it will still be a wired connection in 2020. The electronic poll books, they are the process to streamline the check-in process, and we've been using these poll books successfully since 2006. No data will be transferred using these routers unless the local board requests us to connect the poll books to the server. Since Election Day, we have been analyzing all parts of the system. The poll book software, the network that was used to connect the poll books to the server here, and the poll book database. We are currently in day 4 of testing, and with the local boards have been part of that testing as well, and when it's done, it will be over 20 hours of testing. This testing included recreating the slowness that was reported on election day, implementing the identified fix, and retesting it. And over the course of this testing, we have processed over 600,000 transactions in a combination of manual as well as an automated way to sort of force just get volume quickly. But we've also had people checking in voter after voter after voter. While we are still testing and analyzing the results, here's what we know so far. We have confirmed that the database became locked when performing multiple functions simultaneously. This prevented the poll books from retrieving the requested voter information, which slowed down the check-in process. The slowdown process is what led us to disconnect the poll books from the network and see then the resulting significant improvement. We made some adjustments to the database to performance settings, and during this test of 600,000 transactions, we have not seen the database lock once. Once we finish this testing, maybe today, tomorrow, we intend to work with external database developers to have them validate these changes and review the database and see if they have identified any other things that we can do to improve the performance. Any database changes will be thoroughly tested before we accept it and use it in April. This doesn't alter our decision to let the local boards choose whether or not they want to use the network, and that we will continue to test and take steps to provide full confidence in the system for April and November, of course, but April is close. So with that, we did receive a statement from Verizon, who provides the infrastructure, the network. And I'd like to read what they said. The technology selected to implement same-day registration uses highly secure wireless cellular technology, not unsecured Wi-Fi technology. The wireless technology selected has been tested in real time and test environments. Our support security team, which is comprised of internal and external security experts, has developed comprehensive security standards for designing, deploying, and managing our network based on industry practices and established standards. The standards are set by the International Organization for Standardization, which is ISO, and NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And then we also are fortunate to have two representatives from Cradlepoint here who are the manufacturers of the routers. And so if Craig and Todd want to come up. So Craig Horger is the regional account manager, and Todd Kelly is the chief security officer. And I think Craig is going to start first, if that's still the plan.
For the record, Craig Horger, Cradlepoint, the regional account manager. We appreciate the time today. Just a quick background on Cradlepoint and technology as a whole. Cradlepoint has been used in federal, state, and local agencies for years. Here locally in Maryland, you guys actually use Cradlepoint inside the Maryland State Police. We do secure video upload via Wi-Fi for the in-vehicle camera systems inside the MSP. For Montgomery County Police Department, we also do the same thing. We do secure video offload via Wi-Fi using the Cradlepoint router solution. And then in Anne Arundel, for the fire department, we actually use Cradlepoint as a secure Wi-Fi hotspot inside of the fire trucks to connect apparatus, as well as mobile data terminals and other things that need to securely connect and give access back to systems such as like CAD and dispatch and things like that. When we look at elections as a whole, we Cradlepoint have been securing election systems and voter registration for years. We have, in the last 2 years, I think we've done approximately 40 to 50 counties and state agencies around voter registration and voter check-in. Most recently, the November elections in New York City, the 5 boroughs in New York, we supported the early voter registration for a period of 9 days, as well as the November 5th election from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. The population of those 6 boroughs is approximately about 8 million population. This is very similar with our population size here in Maryland. All of that was done over the Cradlepoint solution. They actually were using Wi-Fi as part of their solution. Unlike your solution, that is a wired connection. With that being said, we brought our Chief Security Officer, Todd Kelly, here to shed light on any questions or provide any more information that you guys might request. Todd, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I was instructed for the record. My name is Todd Kelly, Chief Security Officer for Cradlepoint. I have a background in Master's of Science Information Technology from Northwestern, certified CISSP, certified information security professional. And I've been at Cradlepoint since 2011. Cradlepoint specializes in cellular routers for federal government, public sector, and enterprise businesses across mobile use cases, election systems we've been involved with for many years. Also fixed locations and IoT deployments. And I'm here to answer questions around the solution here that's being used for the e-poll books and any concerns I can, or questions at all around the company or around how we secure our company or our products or our solutions in support of all election systems, including the state of Maryland.
Any members, questions?
Yeah. I'm sure I'm going to ask a number of stupid questions. Bear with me.
No worries.
The slowdown that Nikki described, was that caused by the router or the database because of the multiple requests, performing multiple functions simultaneously?
Well, some of this information is coming from Nick, and from my understanding, it's actually a combination of two things. We actually had an unknown bug pop up at one or a couple locations that we quickly addressed within 15 minutes. That might have contributed to some of that feedback. But overall, I believe there was a bigger slowdown that I believe Nikki commented on previously, which was the actual database. I guess in the testing, this is news to us. That was a big contributor to slowdown. So that, because of the design, with allowing the failover to locally use the e-poll books to communicate with each other, getting rid of the access to the database allowed those e-poll books to work more efficiently. But that was, so there was two problems, to be clear. One, we addressed early in some precinct, wasn't everywhere, within 15 minutes.
That was in the software?
In the software, we were able to make a change.
Firmware of your router?
Actually, it was in the service. We were able to change the service setting to reconfigure it to get rid of this issue that we had in our software. And it was a combination of our router and our network management system. And that was all root caused and deployed within 15 minutes. Following that is later, there was a more broader based, from my understanding, thank you, please help me out here, I'm not sure of all the details, a broader based constituents of complaining about slowness. And that's where we had our teams, working feverishly with the IT teams here to root cause. We weren't able to root cause it, but it was able to be remediated by eliminating the source of the problem, which was the database.
The database slowdown. Not you.
No,
that's not you.
No. You're asking me to comment on something. That's
exactly. That's why I was trying to get to it.
I'm sorry for that. I'm trying to be comprehensive, and I am.
Right. The database.
So maybe Shafiq, you can comment on that.
Yeah. So to what Todd referring to, the bug that he kind of mentioned, or the issue that they addressed, that was much earlier in the day. The slowdown that occurred around 5:30 was an issue with the database configuration on our end. So that's something that, as the polls are connecting to the server here, that issue on that database was a trickle-down effect that impacted all of the poll books. So it's two distinct issues, but the one that caused that slowdown 5:30 was the database.
So the software or firmware in your routers that you found an issue with and fixed in 15 minutes,
Yes.
right?
It was a configuration change.
Okay. So configuration of
a router.
A router, a couple routers.
Yes.
Have all of. How many routers have you purchased?
1,340, I believe.
And how many have been delivered so far?
All 1,300.
All 13. Okay. Have all 1,340 been tested?
Yeah. So I mean, I can answer that. So as part of the intake process, when the routers were received, we went through an acceptance testing process, and as part of that process, We not only turned on the routers to make sure that they were visible, we could see them online, we also pushed down configurations and then went through a process of testing to make sure those configurations were intact. And then the majority of those routers were utilized during the testing leading up to the special election.
Does anybody know why, I don't want to use the right terminology, why the incorrect setting or?
No, it wasn't incorrect. It was an issue in our quality control. We were able to remediate it with a configuration change.
Why wasn't that recognized when SBE received the routers and tested them as opposed to on election day?
It was a very complicated software issue, and it's a combination of timing and load that we feel caused it. So we were able to. We've not seen that issue before. It's just one of these things in software. We try to do a lot of testing ourselves, and when we learn from these escapes, we put it into our test process that test those environments over and over. But this one unfortunately came up. But the good thing is we were able to remediate within 15 minutes, keep things kind of going. And normally we would like to find these things. It's not something, and I can't tell you that'll never happen again. But it's how we respond to it. We have people on site with the team here. We're able to quickly triage it, and that's our commitment to everybody in this room is to continue to do that as a trusted partner.
And you said, I think I heard you say, two main reasons, timing and load?
Combination of various things, but from what I understood from our developers, our development team, is because of there's a lot of state changes in software, and depending on load and how that traffic's being processed, that could trigger different parts of code to be active at any given time. So from what I understand is the combination of load and this the state changes in the software, it brought up an escape area that we never could really stress or test. And that allowed us to come up with our engineers a way to see about remediating it quickly. And that was to reinstantiate the
And that occurred on, I forget how many, that occurred on a day when 87,000 people voted, right?
That was what the.
Right. My point is, I just want to make sure I have the right number.
I think that's right.
What happens in the general election one day, what's our average, what is a good presidential election year turnout?
75% turnout.
Number of voters. 1 million, 2 million? I can't remember.
3 million.
3 million. So here's my load question concern.
Sure.
If the factor of the timing of the data request and the load, happening at the same time, that caused a problem. I'm not saying you could have foreseen. I'm not trying to blame you. I'm just saying, what happens when there's 3 million votes on a day being cast, and
so this is not.
Can it handle that kind of load?
That's a valid question. Like, can we handle an election that big? And we've been handling election systems across the country for many general elections. We've been in business since 2006. Now, this particular issue surfaced in this situation. And it's not to say that won't happen elsewhere. There's also other issues, right? All I can tell you is that we were also in New York, across the general election, across all their districts, everything went flawless. Right? So
Maryland is unique.
And Maryland is unique. But, so I can't sit here and tell you, honestly, nobody that software glitches don't happen. It's how we respond to them. We have a lot of experience in election systems. We have a reputation in the industry, and that's why we're very close partners with Verizon and AT&T, of being one of their best LTE routers on the market. And this is not something we're proud about, but we responded. We're putting in systems in place to test this moving forward, this particular situation, and we want to put more rigor on it with Shafiq's team as we come up to April 16th to do as much as we can to make sure that everything works flawlessly.
Was there any human error
We don't believe there was any human error. Specific to your question about load and capacity, we actually did we analyzed the data points after the fact, after February 4th. We shared a lot of those data points with the team, and from a load perspective of the Cradle Points solution from the network side on the Cradle Points platform, it was only at 6% of the utilization. So it was not a lack of capacity per se in the Cradle Point system. It was just a bug error. So I know you guys don't want to hear that bugs are in the system, but it was a bug. It was remediated, and then to your point, to ensure that you guys wouldn't have these types of issues on a full-scale general election or primary, Shafiq and our teams, we did some root analysis, and then we also did some data point analysis to confirm that it was not a load or a limit of the system itself, and all of those numbers came back at about 6% utilization.
And the one thing that I really want to enforce here, not minimizing the issue that we experienced February 4th, but also to kind of contain it that there was no impact to the voting process. So the poll books were still performing. This is not something that would derail the check-in process in any way. This is something where the data just was not traversing back to us, and within that 15-minute period, it was resolved. And from that point on, let's say I think it was roughly 9:30 in the morning or so, we never had an issue the rest of the day. So, I mean, I think one of the benefits of the solution is the fact that we can have that visibility to make an adjustment that impacts everything very quickly and resolve any issues as quickly as possible and move forward. But so this issue that we're speaking on did not cause any impact as far as the processing of or checking in voters in the polling place.
And the subsequent testing has included over 600,000 transactions.
That's correct.
And haven't found any, so far so good on that test.
So far, so good.
Is there a way to test it with even a higher number of transactions, or?
Yeah, I mean, well,
did
that's
they find something?
Well, no. I mean, right now the testing that we are, in order to really test in an environment that mimics what we'll see, we need poll books, we need resources. So we're working with the local boards to facilitate this. Part of our testing is automatic, just pushing, as Nikki mentioned in this write-up, the automatic pushing of ballots or transactions from the poll book to the server. We're doing various methods of that testing. So to answer your question, yes, part of the testing is just to inundate the server with various amounts of traffic. And we've done various phases of this, and we can continue to expand and increase upon that testing to load the server into the millions, and we will do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So if I understand correctly that the software configuration was a problem in the morning and didn't cause a slowdown. The slowdown that was a problem that caused the disconnection occurred in the late afternoon.
That's correct.
And that was because of the database not able to accept the information that was trying to come in?
No, I don't.
Address that in a closed meeting?
Yes, that would be.
Okay.
Okay.
The question's valid.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the answer that
Right.
the security people prefer to deal with in a closed meeting.
All right. And so the routers were used to wire the poll books together during the special election? Is that correct? Do I understand
Right.
that?
Yes.
So, yeah. So during the special election,
During every election.
the poll books were connected to the routers with wires.
Yes.
And then they used the cellular technology to communicate with us.
Right, but we were connecting the e-poll books before we got the router, connecting them with wires.
Correct.
So the plan is to do that for every polling place now, or in the big six jurisdictions?
For election day in the Big Six, they will use the routers to connect the poll books in every polling place.
Okay, why do we need a $1,400 router to wire the e-poll books together? I mean, I understand the router to communicate with a server that's not on site, but simply wiring the poll books together doesn't seem like you need an expensive router for that.
Well, we have them, and then if a local board wishes to connect, then we have that equipment there for the local board to decide to connect to the central server here.
So Howard County wants to connect to the server. Is that the only county that wants to do it right now?
We haven't heard from all of them yet.
And Montgomery County does not want to.
That's my understanding.
And Prince George's, I think, does not want to.
I believe she does not want to for the primary. I think that's all she said.
$1,400 for a router to wire poll books together. It just seems like a lot.
Well, I also think that it's the, I mentioned earlier that we're looking to replace the poll books for 2022, and that in looking at what equipment we need to implement this network, we look to make sure that we weren't, that it would be also usable for the next one. So it's not that these are never going to be used again. We'll likely need to use them in the 2022 election with our new poll books.
But I still don't understand why they need to use them now. If
Well,
they worked just fine the way they were working in the last election, and we've been asked about poll books deteriorating, and the response that we gave was that that was not correct.
I'm not sure what you mean by poll books deteriorating.
When Mr. Shalek wrote us in April, way back when, one of the things that he said was that he thought that the poll book problems were increasing with every election cycle. And we wrote back and said you are not correct, that poll book problems continue to increase with every election cycle. So what I don't understand is why we would force a local board to use an expensive router simply to wire e-poll books together when we've been doing it that way for years now, and there's no problem with the hardware. Am I missing something?
I can comment on a couple things. The router, your poll books are older, and the technology that's being implements some layers of security that actually helps protect those poll books, or helps Shafiq from monitoring the poll books for indicators or monitoring of indicators of compromise or any kind of nefarious activity. So it's a little bit more than just connection, but it's also future-proof for the evolution, which this architecture that's being implemented is kind of a crawl, walk, run. Other, like LA County, they're all wireless poll books. They're using Wi-Fi, not wired. So the approach that's being taken here is kind of a pragmatic one of using wired connections from those poll books into this router, using the cellular technology that's highly available, if you do, because it can connect to multiple towers. And if there's a wire, if somebody digs that up out of the street, the poll books are down. You know, it's a little bit more resilient from a security perspective because availability of security. And it also has this real-time visibility that your teams can quickly troubleshoot, as indicated in that one example where one poll book wasn't working and even local staff didn't know it and they were able to deploy somebody. So there's a lot of benefits I can see there for voters, but besides just connecting.
Okay, because I was asking about the polling places that are not connected to the network. The most secure system is a system that's not connected to the network. Am I missing something?
So part of it is that.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with that statement completely.
Okay, and
if you don't
so,
have, because part of EAC, part of being secure is having visibility, and I think what you want to have is visibility to see. If you just assume it's not connected and it's secure, that means you assume it hasn't been infected with it. So one.
If I may, you might explain the word visibility a little more to everyone.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Because you probably you know exactly what it means.
I'm sorry.
not sure everybody does.
Yeah, I dive deep. So there's this concept of you detect bad things from happening. So being able to you have technology to detect bad cyber things happening. So that in order to detect them, you have to have visibility in how they behave. And visibility meaning you get metrics to data from each element to see how they're behaving. To say, oh, that one looks like it's infected with a virus because it's trying to talk to something it's not supposed to. So in the context of this architecture, the e-poll books, having visibility of how they communicate from a networking perspective lets you understand, gives you confirmation that they're behaving the way they should be or they're not. If you don't have them networked to somebody's expertise of Shafiq's or in the IT organization, you're making an assumption that they're not infected and that they're okay. And that can be true as well, but a general practice of getting confirmation that they're okay is this concept of visibility. And so the routers give you that visibility of how they're actually communicating and making sure they're just communicating the way you want them to. And if they attempt to communicate any other way, you get alerted to that, which gives you an idea, hey, there might be something wrong. It could be just malfunctioning, or it could be compromised with a virus, or trying to infect other things in the environment. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm just saying that it's an enhancement to see what's going on.
But it comes at a price and a risk. We test the e-poll books to look for irregularities before we send them out into the field. So once they're out into the polling place and they're connected to each other, my concern at that point would be a bad actor getting access to one, but that would seem really difficult. Whereas what you're describing to me is that we connect them to each other and then we connect them to the internet and start sending information.
Nothing is ever connected to the internet.
Yeah, this is all restricted, but knowing that they're compromised, this is
There's another terminology issue. You're using the term internet, and every IT security person in the room flinched back from that.
Okay.
And
well, it could
basically
be a
saying,
vocabulary thing, and I'm not a computer scientist, obviously. But my understanding is always that there's a difference between the internet and the web, and that the internet is the infrastructure. It's the computers, it's the routers, it's the cables, it's the phone companies, it's the servers, it's all that infrastructure. And then the web are the applications that sit on top of the infrastructure. So I have email as a web application, and my email would talk to your email web application over the web because of protocols. But email can't happen without an internet because it has to have that infrastructure.
That's correct. Your analogy of the internet is accurate, just like when you sign in to do your banking transactions, if you do use online banking or from your phone. The point that we were talking about, though, is about monitoring your information assets. And as a best practice, according to CIS controls and the Election Assistance Commission and NIST, it's actually specified that you need the ability to detect and monitor and audit your network in some way. So that's just the best practice. And what I'm saying is this is an enabler for you guys to do that very quickly, and there's been some examples here of that benefit. I'm not saying it's up to you to discern value, honestly, and your question is valid. Is $1,400, is it worth it? I'm just commenting on the benefits as a cybersecurity professional and, on what they are, some of them.
And I would completely agree with you that if you have a network, it's very important to monitor and audit the network. But if you don't have a network, you don't need to monitor and audit it, except later audits after the fact or people on scene monitoring it. And I like Mr. Nickley's story, but, why is it so hard to just make a phone call and say we have a poll book that's acting up?
See, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the issue that we experienced, and that there is no visual indicator on the poll book that the connection was down. That's why there was no impact to the check-in process. So the scenario that Guy Mickley outlined, the poll workers checking in voters. Let's say it's during early voting. They're checking in voters. They don't know that poll book is not transmitting that data back to SB headquarters. With this implementation that we're putting in place, we have that visibility, so that Mr. Mickley could then say, hey, we got a problem with that polling place. They go out there. So the difference is you're taking that assessment out of the hands of the election judges and putting it in the hands of your field support and your LBEs to assess every polling place very quickly and make adjustments as needed.
Right, but that sort of reinforces my point, that the only reason to be able to have a professional assess the operations of the poll book is if you have a network. Because if you don't have a network, then it's just people on site whether or not it's working or not, because it's going to be uploaded later manually.
So to that, I would raise this, that understand that when you're using the term network, I think you're looking at it from the perspective, at least I assume, you're looking at it from the perspective that the poll books in the polling place transmitting data to another endpoint.
Yes.
You still have a network during an election day since we've had these poll books. The difference is it's just a local area network. So you still have those 3, 4, 5 poll books in that polling place that are talking to one another.
Right.
So in that scenario that I just painted, if you have one poll book of those 3 or 4 that, let's say you have a bad Ethernet cable, the poll worker will not know that that one poll book is not communicating with the other 3 or 4. With this device in place, we can make that determination. We still have the ability, without passing any data from the electronic poll book to SB headquarters, we still have visibility to say, hey, we still have an issue here. In the instance that Mr. McLeod brought up, he could still deploy a field support technician to that place so that that one poll book is not a failure point.
Right. Okay, I understand that. So if you've got 3 poll books and they're hardwired together, they're actual wires, it's not communicating through the air, and one of them stops updating from the information from the other 2, so it's operating by itself. That doesn't seem to me like a huge problem, because all 3 poll books are going to have their data uploaded, so we're going to get all the data at the local board. And the only problem I can think of would be in-person voter fraud, and the person doing they'd have to do the in-person voter fraud first of all, which is rare, and then they would have to be sure and go to the right poll book, which would be unusual, and they'd have to know that one of the poll books was malfunctioning. I mean, I just don't see a huge benefit.
Well, I think that at this point in time, we have the poll books, we have the routers,
Well, surely,
but we have them. And we have them.
right, but isn't there a clause in a big contract like this that you can return them after a certain point?
I think
Up to a certain point, like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
I think we kind of used them.
We've used all 1,300 of them?
They have all been accepted.
Yeah.
And there's,
So-
there are warranties in all state contracts, but
Okay.
these are not faulty devices. So we've
So
there's
accepted
no reason,
them.
okay.
So my point
now-
is that we're moving forward. That's my point here. We're moving forward.
Well, what we're in now is something called the sunk cost fallacy.
Well, what we're in now is, and I know what you're saying,
We're changing our behavior, we're doing what we were doing before, even though the circumstances have changed, and it's not that rational anymore
now,
to do this.
I think it's a valid approach to say, where do we go with this? How effective is it? How valuable will it be to us? And then we make a decision. The entire case. The question is it valuable? You know, are we going someplace with it? Where do we end up? And that's, I think, where we want to focus. Not the road that brought us here, but the road that leads from here.
Right, and this is all news to me. I had no idea that we were planning to use the routers anyway, even though the counties aren't using the network, and I know I'm using the non-Meridian. I just learned this, and I'm trying to understand it, and it doesn't make sense to me. It seems like taking a risk for no reward. And I understand that we've spent all this money, but that doesn't justify not doing the right thing.
Well, there's no risk for using these routers if they're connecting the poll books to prevent albeit an unusual situation of someone trying to vote more than once in the same location, but that is still something that we care about and want to make sure that we have something in place to absolutely prevent it from happening.
Yes.
And keep in mind that all of the judges' material has been written, judges have been trained on using this device, that you will hear from the local boards, we hate changes once training has started. And so we're also being respectful of the fact that all of the judges in Congressional District 7 have been trained and used it, and that training in the other counties has already started. I mean, the big counties, maybe not the small counties, but in the counties that would be using these on election day, that training has already started.
I just think it's a mistake to go to wireless communication when there's no reason to. And there doesn't seem to be a really good reason to do it.
I think what you're actually saying. Go ahead.
I just have two more questions, somewhat related to that. In my simple mind, your communication between the poll books and SBE, compare that to get down the street to an ATM, and the communication between that standalone ATM and the bank.
Yeah, the data, the poll book data, if there was a wire between the reader and the communication device being our router inside that ATM, we're doing the encryption to make sure nobody can compromise the integrity of that transaction.
You would say it's fairly similar.
Fairly similar, yeah. Using the standards to encrypt that data. The other thing is we also, wireless is used generically here. In this case, we're using LTE technology, 4G technology, as a WAN. We could just as easily use a wired WAN as well. You can plug that in. However, from a security perspective and the risk analysis that was done by the team and third parties, that's treated as untrusted. Because no matter how secure it is, the architecture is, we're not going to trust it. We are going to encrypt it like we would talking to our bank. So before it even goes on that network, that data is encrypted according to NIST standards, much like banking transactions. And so hopefully that answers.
The reason I asked that, make that comparison, I don't know about, I trust going to an ATM. They never give me more than I ask for. They never give me less than I ask for. I've been using an ATM for, I don't know, 57, so a long time. My bank account's never been hacked by using my ATM. So I get to the point where I think, well, if it's good enough for the banks, it should be good enough for elections. Am I off there?
So what the security we go through for our product that actually sits in ATMs and does that over LTE, does the same kind of use case over, we sit in a lot of ATMs. But Verizon and AT&T with their FirstNet, for example, we go through, they tear open our routers, they go through our source code, we get validated every year all the time on our product, on our software and hardware. And this is a part of our normal course of doing business so that we can ensure we're providing a secure solution to all our customers. And
awesome. So in terms of the analogy is exactly correct. It's very similar. Basically, again, that secure data transport is what we're providing for you guys. The edge layer of security that you guys have that transaction is not going to a bank or going into the ether. It's going into a secure database that you guys own, manage, operate, and secure yourselves. So from that perspective, you guys have that added security. So in terms of the analogy, though, it's 100% accurate.
Will these routers, you haven't purchased the new e-poll books yet. I want to ask the question just to make sure somebody asks it. I assume that we will look to buy new e-poll books that work with and are compatible with these routers.
That was one of the requirements when we were looking for this solution that we have now that we're put in place, with the ability to build and adapt to whatever solution we move forward as far as electronic poll books are concerned.
Thank you.
we're deployed with some of these new e-poll books.
some of the
And
new
we
poll
provided
books that
references.
they're looking at, you're
Yes.
already deployed.
Yes, and
Correct.
we've given them our references, they have direct communications with them, so they can validate with their own independent evaluation with other states and counties across the U.S., including LA County and New York, others.
Couple comments.
No, go ahead, go ahead. You've been waiting.
So have you. I wanted to make one comment about the poll books as they are wired together. It's not, my estimation is that you're not going to find too often that somebody's going to try to come in and go to multiple poll books on purpose. What I have seen many provisional ballots on, and why they have to be connected, is people with similar names who come in that are junior and senior that live at the same address. And I can't tell you how, dozens would come in during our provisional count where the checking judge would accidentally check in the dad, the junior or the senior, and then the junior comes in to vote and the other one's already been checked in. So we have to fix that on the other end. We see that all the time, and I think that if you didn't have the poll books together, you would see that you'd have 2 credits for voting in MD voters for the junior and none for the senior, and you'd see that a lot. So I think that they have, that they need to be talking to each other, or else you're going to see that much more prevalent, and it happens a lot. Is there some thought to if we have a successful primary to ramping up and having more people communicate their data in the general? Or is that not really in the thinking stage right now?
So we have said that it would not be required for the primary or the general.
Okay.
But if a local board wanted to, that we would work with them to do that. So I think that's within the realm of possibility. Seeing how April goes, that one or more local boards may decide to implement on a partial scale or full scale. That will be up to the local boards to make that decision.
And the data that we would get out of the boards that did participate would help us making a decision on what we did then in the next gubernatorial cycle.
Correct. Correct, yeah.
Now, you mentioned the routers not being connected to the network, I believe, some of them. Are the routers in the local board, are they connected to serve sort of as monitors to the system that's hardwired?
I'm not sure I follow.
Are the routers monitoring the hardwired system of the poll books?
If they're connected to the network.
So,
But they have to be connected to the network, right? Okay. Okay.
yeah. So when you're saying monitoring, I guess I'm trying to make
That's the
sure.
visibility. I guess I'm saying monitoring and
Okay,
perhaps
yeah,
we
okay.
use
That's
the
what
word
I was just trying to make
visibility,
sure I
yeah.
understood what you were saying. So
To make sure everything is operating properly.
So one of the advantages with this solution is the network, the router, the configurations, everything is managed by SBE.
Okay.
So, for example, literally, election morning, when the routers are turned on, we can see that the routers are online. We can gauge cellular signal health. We can do diagnostics even before the polls open if we needed to, just to make sure that everything was functioning properly. So we do have that level of monitoring. And then, as Todd kind of spoke to, for example, let's say someone tried to manipulate a router. We have the ability of receiving notifications about anything any attempts to compromise that router.
See, I'm old enough to remember the time and when I went to vote, I pulled a lever and they punched a hole in the paper. And I worked as an election judge years ago. And at the end of the day, we pulled that paper out of the machine. And we sat there for 2 or 3 hours tallying them up. Now everything is more or less electronic. We're finding out, people say, well, we want written ballot, but at the same time, we want immediate results because we are a microwave instantaneous society now. But at the same time, we want to maintain the security. So as we are moving forward, we have to have the infrastructure in place to accommodate the moving things. I have an iPad here I purchased 3 years ago. It's already out of date. but I still use it. And we now have suits saying we need to have on two sides. We need to have something electronic, and the other side said, well, we need to have paper. How are we going to balance the two? I don't know. Who's on first, who's on second? I don't know. But it has to occur. But we have to have something in place to monitor, to adapt, and adjust to the change. We can't live in the Flintstone era. And we have to maintain the security and privacy of voting, but at the same time, allow people to vote. That's all. I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Does anybody feel a need for the board to do anything at this point?
Mr. Chairman, actually I do, only because we've been criticized for not doing certain things. So it may sound a little redundant, but I would like to make a motion that we not, I want to word this right, that we not utilize these routers to connect polling places with the SBE after primary and general election of 2020 unless a local board of election requests it. And then then we will reevaluate everything, but then we'll look at it further after the 2020 election. Is that?
Point of information question about that. And Shafiq, you'd be able to probably tell me this. Are we, the word in that motion was connect. So push data and connect are two different things. So we're still connecting everywhere and have visibility of it, even though they're not pushing data. So that motion would keep us from even connecting and seeing the visibility, maybe. And maybe the more proper thing would be to push data to the SBE server. Would that be more accurate?
That's correct, and I think in addition to that, you need to distinguish between early voting and election day. There's early voting, there's our requirement where you're dealing with multiple early voting centers within a jurisdiction. So you want to distinguish that as well.
Yes, early voting, they have to do it. Versus election day, it's up to the counties to do it. So just to understand your motion, you're trying to basically make a motion on what the proposal was.
To memorialize what the
memorialize
proposal
what's
was. Yes. For the board to go on record that this is what I support.
So do I understand it?
Yeah, I think we have to have a restatement of it,
Yeah.
if only with staff assistance, but a restatement so that we accurately capture what's being moved, and really, but also what we're being advised on. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bill?
Can you try to help clarify it?
Yeah, you had a grasp of it, Shafiq was.
Shafiq made an excellent point that really there should be early voting. It should be used, right? So the motion would be that during early voting, that there would be full use of the network as provided, but then on election day, the pushing of data in the connection
From the electronic.
from the electronic poll books would be up to the local jurisdiction to participate.
Now, just for clarity, I'm going to read through.
Okay, let's see, make sure that would that
I just
mean?
want to make sure that pushing, that if we eliminate pushing, that it doesn't eliminate monitoring. The data does have to get from there to us.
I see what you're saying.
To monitor.
Allowing full monitoring of poll books from SBE.
Now, are we talking about in the, just again, so we're all clear on this. When we do this, I want it done
so that we're all on the same page and it's clear. Are we talking at the early voting that it would be wireless? Is he asking a question?
Yes.
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 Okay, so what you're saying too, Bill, is that the early voting in the primary and general would be wirelessly connected.
The full utilization with data flow back.
Full utilization, meaning wirelessly connected to the capabilities of the system.
I think you're talking about, you should talk about the specific data. I think you should just talk about the data, not the concept of how things, the voters' data will not leave premise unless a county allows it to.
On election day.
On election day. Because that's really what you're talking about.
That's
You're
correct.
talking about protecting data, voter registration data. It's up to the county on whether they want to allow that data to go to securely be transferred to
On election day.
on election day.
But we're also saying, we're being, this is the discussion of the motion, just for clarity. We're saying that the data, we're being permissive about election day, but we're being non-permissive about early voting.
We're fully permissive in early
No,
voting.
for early voting, we're saying that everybody will use the wireless. Isn't that what?
Oh, I see what
That's
you're
what
saying.
everybody's saying.
So I
And
believe
that's what the staff is saying out there.
you're saying that early voting would be using the solution as
So I'm just saying that's what you're saying.
Right.
Okay, so the staff is saying early voting, and you actually said it too.
Yeah.
Early voting needs to be wireless because of, I'm not going to try to go back and pull the pieces of word, but so that the data gets down and it's moved around, and because of the nature of early voting, because of different centers and multiples and so on, everything's combined into one. That's where we run into a problem, that we need this connectivity. Okay, contractors are nodding to me. The connectivity that would allow us to do our job efficiently. That's what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Voter data.
Voter data unless
They
local,
request.
unless the county requests it.
And it's PJ's motion and he's writing here, so.
She's trying to make sense out of what we're saying. I just want to make sure that when we walk away from this table, I want everybody to have clarity of what it is that the board is saying, and that the board has clarity of what the board is saying.
Right.
So that's what I want. And PJ's down here still writing. I didn't know if you could see it.
Well,
I don't know if I can see it. And the question becomes less the second part about election day and more the first part about the wireless system. Everybody agree that's more the crux of the issue that we've been dealing with here today. Talking.
Can you say that again?
I mean, that the wireless usage of the system is more the crux of what we're talking about today, as opposed to simply using the router inside the wire system. That's the one.
But what it comes down to is just the transfer of voter data.
Mhm.
Because we're already using these for other things and as for
Visibility.
early voting as well, and for other things on election day. The only thing that would be limited would be the voluntary participation of an LBE for the movement of voter data on election day to the SBE.
Okay, so what you're saying is, I'm using different words, and again, we're still in the discussion of the motion, which will probably be restated, withdrawn and restated.
He's writing.
In a few
PJ's
minutes.
writing.
He's thinking about it now. Is that we're going to transmit data no matter what. We're going to be transmitting data to SBE from out in the field back, actually here, back to SBE.
for monitoring the
No matter
routers,
what, no matter if it's wired or no matter if it's is wireless the correct term?
I wouldn't call it wire, it's really it's a connection, right?
Yeah.
And you're happen to use LTE, but you can also, a local, if you have a wired internet connection, you can plug that in too. So everybody keeps saying wireless router, and I think that gets interpreted differently. It's basically a router, whether you want to use a router to communicate local data to the central site in SBE's data center.
And I understand what you're saying. But what I'm saying, it's the mode of transmission of data.
Yes.
And that's what we're dealing with. So the mode is, in working off of what you were saying, and what Shafiq is saying, and what Bill is saying, we're going to transmit data. We're going to do that. We have to do that. We don't have a choice now. We have to do it. And the data is going to be encrypted. Regardless of the mode, it's going to be encrypted data.
Yes.
And so the only issue then is that in the election day configuration, when we will have higher volume, that we are saying we're being permissive in this motion. We're being permissive about whether they want to move data other than through a wired connection.
Voter data.
Voter data,
We
yeah.
didn't mention the type of connection.
Yeah.
It's just voter data.
Well,
Literally
the
like
type
you said.
of connection, one of the things that's come up, and you know this, well, you guys know it too. You knew, I know. I can't remember if you were at the briefing.
It wasn't.
Okay, I didn't think you were, but I know you were. Security of the system, as in the mode by which it transmits through non-wired connections, was the issue. It was the issue. And this is what I was complimenting Shafiq on actually earlier in the meeting, in the way that he presented things and handled that meeting. Has anyone come back to you after that meeting and said, from an IT shop, and said, no, we see a flaw?
No, I've not heard from anyone.
Has Dewitt ever come down to you and said, we see a flaw?
No, we've not heard anything from Dewitt or any other IT.
And you guys are dealing with the feds on exactly the same system.
Yes.
Because we treat it as untrusted.
So, so we have clarity. So I don't want anybody later saying that we didn't understand what we were doing or something like that. So when we do the right thing and the wrong thing, that we knew we'll do the thing, we'll understand that we're doing it, is that early voting, we're going to use a mode which is not reliant on entirely on wired connections.
That's correct.
And on election day, we're being permissive and saying you can use that type of connectivity, or you can stay with the wired connections.
No.
No? Did I say that wrong again? You think I did.
We are still connecting to them.
Yeah.
They're just not moving data
Right.
across the connection that will be established on election day
Right.
of who's voted.
Can I try to clarify?
Take a shot.
Okay, so early voting, mandatory use of a wireless network to transfer voter data and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic. Is that generally grammatically correct? Election day, permissive use of wireless network to transfer voter data unless the local board requested. Well, that doesn't work, but
You're right.
permissive. The local board shall use routers to connect poll books within a polling place and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic. So we're going to, during early voting, we're going to get voter data and we're going to have the visibility, the monitoring, whatever's the right word, is what I heard you say. On election day, use the routers and allow for visibility up to the local boards to decide whether voter data is moving. Did I summarize that right?
That's it.
That's right.
A bunch of people here think
By
you're a great
golly, I
job.
think you got it.
Can I go home now?
No.
Mr. Chairman, just one possible word. You use the word wireless.
Yeah,
She, no.
I did.
No, she
She did at
did.
one point?
Is it incorrect for me to suggest we use the words secure wireless.
We hope it is.
Right. Well, no, I wanted to say what it is.
Well, what it is LTE technology.
Right.
So not Wi-Fi. So I prefer to use
Exactly.
LTE. That's what every LTE. That's much different than wireless. Includes Bluetooth, everything.
So secure LTE network.
Yes.
Do you want to say encrypted too?
That's statement on record from Verizon. I mean, that's what we're
Do you want
using.
encrypted too?
Nobody can.
Secure and encrypted LTE network?
Just
That's
secure
accurate.
LTE. Secure LTE.
Secure LTE.
Oh, you're right. You
When you
can't
say
say network. You can only encrypt data. Got it.
Right, when you say wireless, the average person on the street thinks, oh, that's the same thing I can get at Starbucks. This is not the same thing as Starbucks.
Exactly. Yes, it's not.
So that's why I don't like using the word wireless.
Use cellular.
I agree.
I got something
They
to say.
say
Secure and LTE.
Second.
Do you want me to read it again?
You can.
Okay. It's okay. I got it. So during early voting, the local boards shall use the secure LTE network to transfer voter data and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic. Election day, the local boards may use the secure LTE network to transfer voter data. The local board shall use routers to connect poll books within a polling place and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic.
Can we break that into three? So we have votes on three?
Isn't it 2? What's the third?
It's the early voting centers, it's the local boards that want to network, and it's using the routers and local boards that don't want to network.
You need 3 different motions?
Yes, because my issue, I'm going to say something flattering for a change. My issue is not any concern with the quality of the IT security work. I'm not a computer scientist, but I've been in on the briefings, and it looks to me like it's the best security that we could have. It really does. I mean that sincerely. My problem is I have never been persuaded with the early questions that this is even needed. Do we really have a problem with same-day registration data? I've never seen any information or analysis that would persuade me of that. And this is one of those situations where I've really spent a lot of time thinking about this. I've gone over and over every document I have, which isn't very many because we don't get much documentation, trying to figure out what am I missing? Why don't I understand this? I talk to people who are computer scientists in my family, and I say, this is what's going on at the Board of Elections. Can you explain data transfers to me and explain how this is going to cause a terrible problem, a terrible delay? And they can't explain it to me. So I've never gotten over the initial hurdles. One, do we have a problem? Do we really have a problem with same-day registration data? And then, 2, what about alternatives? I mean, there's a bill that can go through the legislature that would change the date of the canvas, push it back to give us more time to upload the data so we wouldn't have to do this. I've never had these questions answered. The only things I've ever had are security briefings. And I'm impressed, guys, really, I am. And now here we are with this new proposal, which is to use these routers in polling places in counties that aren't connecting to this wireless network. I'm going to say wireless. I'm going to say internet, too. I'm not aware of a problem. It's never been reported to me that there was a problem with this, and so it's like these are solutions in search of a problem. And my philosophy with using internet wireless connections with elections is that nothing should be on the internet unless it absolutely has to. And so early voting, I understand it absolutely has to. And I'm willing to vote for that. But the others, I'm not. I'm just not, because I have the groundwork to persuade me has never been done. And it isn't a question of security.
I think that's a valid question, the benefits of the implementation. We've heard implementation benefits from other state and local agencies about the efficiency of the process and things like that, but I think that's valid. Like, and I think maybe there is some data on the NCSL or EAC site on the other states and some of their experiences of those benefits to voters into running it efficiently. I don't know. That is, but that you should see a benefit. If you don't, any
Well,
technology with it, you
I'm
should
not
see a
opposed to
benefit.
benefits, and I'm sure there are benefits. It's just, do we really need to do that? That's the question. It's never been satisfactorily answered for me.
Let me just, unless you have more.
No.
Okay. You're asking to vote, I understand splitting it in two. It was the three-parter that I'm not clear on.
Early voting center. I know the routers there are old, and I have no problem replacing them with high-end routers. And I have no problem with trying to network them to the state board gateways.
The secure LT network.
Secure LT network. That's okay.
Okay. Can we kind of combine those into just one? And leave it?
And how do I vote no?
Okay.
So if I,
But, go.
try to clarify, so the second motion for election day is 2 sentences. And I think you're asking that the 2 sentences be separate. So it would be, the local board shall use the secure LTE network to transfer voter data, period. That's one. And the second piece is that the local board shall use the routers to connect poll booths within a polling place and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic. That's the second sentence. Are you?
Except the first one was permissive.
Yes. Oh, sorry, may, yep, all right, may use.
Okay.
Are you asking for the 2 sentences to be
So
two separate motions?
I thought there were 3 different issues. One is what do we do with early voting centers?
Right, we
2,
have that.
what do we do with local boards that want to connect to the network? And then 3, what do we do with local boards that don't want to connect to the network? Do we make them use these routers?
Yeah, that's the second sentence. The local board shall use routers to connect poll books within a polling place and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic.
That's early vote.
That's election.
Election day.
Oh, right. You didn't say secure LT. Got it.
It's the monitoring that requires the routers.
Yes.
It's the visibility
Right.
monitoring.
Yeah.
I'd say it's monitoring.
Right.
Using visibility
You're the
now.
one.
Yeah, I'll make it.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Is it the 2 sentences if they're separate? Is that the 2,
Well,
the
I think
second
they
and the
should-
third motion you
It
want?
isn't just for me. I think they're 3 different issues. So that they should be in separate motion.
And we're just trying to make sure, we're actually, I think all of us are agreed to do that, to have 3 separate motions. It's just getting the form of them so that it meets what you want.
To vote no on?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So if
yeah.
motion 2 is, and what, it's not anywhere in all these, but we're talking about the 2020 elections, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, but, so motion 2 would be for the 2020 elections, the local board may use the secure LTE network to transfer voter data. That's the permissive. And then motion 3 is for the 2020 elections, the local board shall use, we're talking the 6 local boards too. The 6 local boards shall use routers to connect poll books within a polling place and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic.
Those are the 3 issues, I think.
Okay.
One is they shall, and the other one is they may.
And one is may transfer voter data, and the third one is shall connect and allow for the visibility.
The no voter data.
But no voter data in number, well, right.
Number 3.
Number 3. 2 is dealing with voter data, and that's permissive. 3 is mandatory use of the routers and visibility. Does that get, or did I get the 3 motions
I
right?
think those are the 3 issues, yeah.
And they're all just 2020.
Yes, it's
Primary
only for
and general.
2020, that's correct.
For the 6 jurisdictions.
For the 6 jurisdictions.
No. I'm sorry.
Not election, not early voting.
Early voting is
Early voting
statewide.
is all.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read them one at a time?
You bet.
Okay. For the 2020 primary general elections, the local board shall use the secure LTE network to transfer voter data and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic.
That's the early voting center?
That's for early voting. I need to put that in. I have it here.
Can I say so moved? Well, we have those words fresh in our mind.
So, yes. Yes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we want to vote on these as we do them?
Sure.
Yeah, prefer that.
Okay. So, as to this item, which has just been read, moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Proposed motion 2. For the 2020 primary general elections, on election day, I know that's not grammatically correct, but on election day, the local board,
It's also just election, isn't it? You said just primary.
Sorry, for the 2020 primary general election, the 6 local boards may use for election day the secure LTE network to transfer voter data.
Well, can I have a point of information on that? What if another county wanted to do it? Do they have routers?
No.
Okay.
But the 6 have their routers, and they still have them, despite somebody saying they were going to box them up and send them back, and they were told to keep them.
Right, we haven't picked up any, technically, we still have Prince George's because they don't have space for it yet, but they're here in state, in our warehouse, waiting for delivery.
Could you read that again?
Yes. For the 2020 primary and general elections, the 6 local boards may, on election day, use the secure LTE network to transfer voter data. May, election day, voter data.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Ayes have it. Motion is passed.
Proposed motion number 3. For the 2020 primary general elections, the local board shall use, on election day, routers to connect electronic poll books within polling places and allow for monitoring of devices and traffic. So election day, this is the 6 again, I apologize, and allow for the visibility, the monitoring. That's right. Okay.
Your motion.
So moved.
Moved. Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Malcolm, you voted, right?
Yeah, no, I thought I heard you.
Okay. Well.
That was easy.
Yeah, it was. Okay, at this time, disclosure of campaign contributions. Any contributions? No. No. Okay. No contributions.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, schedule next meeting.
Should have a conflict on the 26th of March because it is, everybody in here should be there. It's opening day.
For what? For what?
Baltimore.
Yeah, what are they opening on?
We might win 65 games this year. You never know.
Is that a new shopping center? Okay.
Don't make fun of me.
19th?
Are you going?
Oh, yeah. Every year for 23 years.
On the 2nd?
Huh?
19th or the 2nd?
19th works for me.
19th?
Or the following week?
I'm out of town.
Following week's April.
Yes, it
But
is.
that's, we could do it, but if he's out of town.
19th works if that works for me.
That's fine. I'm not sure how much stuff we'll have for you.
That's what I was wondering.
But
True.
3 weeks.
Or I could do the 25th or 27th. I don't know if it has to be a Thursday.
Really rather not do it on the 27th,
Okay?
Friday. Bridge.
Bridge.
It's not that bad, is it?
25th? Does that work for everybody?
Maryland did.
It's Maryland Day. It's holiday, isn't it? State
What
employees.
better a day?
You can wait
Maryland Day.
It's not,
Mr. Fun.
it's not a holiday.
I saw. That's
It's Maryland Day a holiday?
Not any longer.
Yeah, I didn't
No.
think so.
In my heart it is.
So, now that we've gotten that out of our systems, 25th? Only once, twice?
That's a Tuesday?
That's a Wednesday.
Wednesday the 25th. That's a Maryland Day, right?
That's what we said, yeah.
So is it a holiday here?
No.
No.
Oh, okay.
I'll be in your heart.
Works for me.
I do my best to understand that.
Well, the majority go, if not, make it work.
On the 25th is a Wednesday?
Yes.
That's fine.
25th? Okay, 25th it is. 2 o'clock? Okay.
Orioles, thank you.
We're all on.
2 o'clock, not 2:30.
Sure they do. Okay, next meeting is scheduled. Okay, we have closed sessions that are set up. The board will, just for information of people in the audience, the board is going to go into closed session. We will adjourn the open meeting, and we do not anticipate, do not expect, and do not plan to come back, do any business in open meeting. The board will now consider whether to meet in closed session to discuss compensation of 3 individuals over whom the state board has jurisdiction as permitted by section 3305B1 of the general provisions article. Consult with counsel to obtain legal advice and consult with staff on pending litigation as permitted by section 3305B7 and 8 of the general provisions article. Meeting in closed session will allow members of the board to seek and obtain legal advice with board counsel without waiver of the attorney-client privilege. Discuss network architecture and election. Security of election network is permitted by section 3305B15 of the general provisions article. Meeting in closed session allows members of the board to discuss cybersecurity without risking the network architecture and security of election systems. May I have a motion to meet in closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion having passed, the board will meet in closed session in accordance with exemptions B1, 7, 8, and 15 of section 3305 of the Open Meetings Act. And at this time, I declare the open meeting to be adjourned.
We're going to have 5 minutes.
Yeah.